Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Media Connect 2023. We are here for the keynote session with Quincy Olatunde from NBCUniversal and Peacock. Before we do that, a few housekeeping elements. We are giving away another $50 gift card, Amazon gift card, for the person who can be the first to post in the chat the correct name of the song and the band that was just playing during the opening credits there. You need to be here at the end of this great keynote, which is going to be fascinating, keep you riveted the entire time, to win. If you're not here, you don't win. We go on to the next person in the chat. So everybody should put in, because you never know who's going to be here at the end. Put your chat in the chat. So if you have things to say and you have answers to that question, put them in the chat. Ask your questions at the end. I will throw this open. I will be interviewing Quincy, and I will throw this open for questions and answers at the end. So hold your questions, write them down. Please don't post them, because I'm not going to be reading the chat along the way. I'm going to be engaged in interviewing Quincy. You should know that all the sessions that we're doing here from all 3 days of Streaming Media Connect will be up on the YouTube channel for Streaming Media next week. The link is in the chat. And with that, I want to welcome to the stage my partner in crime for this keynote conversation, I don't have a fire for the fireside conversation. I apologize in advance for that. But I want to bring VP of products from Peacock NBCUniversal, Quincy Olatunde, to the stage. Quincy, can you turn on your camera? There he is.
Hi, everyone.
How are you, man?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for inviting me out for this. Should be fun.
So first, I want to start with some controversy. There is a debate, a raging debate going on backstage at Streaming Media Connect right now. We're doing the research on who is coming in the furthest today for Streaming Media Connect. And I think it's you. You are where today?
No, I'm not, actually. Where's everybody streaming from?
Well, no, where are you streaming from?
Oh, I'm streaming from Rome. I'm actually on vacation, but when Evan told me that he wanted to have some conversation with me, I'm like, okay, come on, let's do it. So sacrificing a little bit. Kids are out doing some things with the cousins, but I decided to come in here and chop it up.
Well, I think chop it up. I think so. First, you deserve a reward, I think, for coming the furthest. There's somebody in Germany. We're doing that research, but you're also coming from vacation, which is really greatly appreciated. So, you are VP of Product, Peacock, NBCUniversal, yes?
Yeah, with a lean on data.
Okay, great. So, what the fuck do you do? I feel like we don't ask that question enough of each other. Like, I'm a media universe cartographer. I think it's a fair question. Like, what the fuck do you do? So, Quincy, for someone like me, if I had to explain what you do, what the fuck do you do?
Okay, so I look at it from like a great question, by the way. Kind of took me left field. If I was to kind of break it down from a day to day, the core of my days are typically a kaleidoscope of, insights to help drive, the human connection through the products that we create and all the tech wonders that we have and all the innovation and solution that we have to do, right? So it's a way of saying that my world straddles two areas when you think about it departmentally, which is I lead the enablement function and also the enablement department and also a functional department. And what that means as a VP of data products is that the data that courses through the veins of what we do, right, to help us make better decisions, better understanding for our consumers, right, so that we can serve them better, make the connection better. So my world is that, right, and it's this fascinating routine where I can connect with my team and stakeholders to understand the needs and the trends, then help bridge the insights we get from millions of data points, and then translate that into some business decisioning and products. So it varies tremendously, right, due to those two-pronged nature that I mentioned. But all in all, what I normally say is that I'm a product manager who just happens to know how to use data to build and scale products. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the collision between those two halves of your brain is really kind of that kind of Swiss Army knife. I think we discussed this over lunch at one point. Being being able to traverse those two worlds is really going to be one of the key abilities necessary to kind of make progress in the ecosystem on a moving forward basis. You're not going to have the luxury of either being a product manager or understanding data. You're going to need to do both of those things in order to understand how to use data. You have to understand product, and in order to make great product, you're going to have to listen to the data. Yeah.
100%. And one of the things is like one of the most challenging bit is like the context switching that you have to do on a daily basis.
Context switching.
Yeah.
Say that again. Context switching.
Context switching. You
Yeah.
have
So
to
explain that phrase really quickly.
So it is the, like if you are, let's say you're just an engineer, like, okay, engineering, I'm developing, I'm coding or whatever. If you're designing, you're just designing, you're coding. But if you're working across the business and you're an enablement function, in addition to also owning products, what happens is that you can work with your ad sales folks who are thinking about the product they're looking to bring it to market. You work with your commerce folks who are working with all our partners, right? You work with the features that we're building and we pull into the market. You work with, content folks who are like, we want to understand how well we're progressing and what we're doing so that we can connect with our consumers better. We can serve them better. For me, it's all about that connection and to serve our audiences and our fans better. So it's like you have to really have hand in all the pockets to be able to say, okay, how do we tie all these things together? And when we don't have something, how do we procure it?
Yeah, and I think your ability to context switch, your ability to jump from the audience perspective and looking at the data and what they want and what they need to be satisfied, and therefore become longer staying customers with longer lifetime values. You have to be able to explain that to the other, as you call them, stakeholders, which I think in this case included in your list, ad sales. But I imagine there's other partners on that side of it as well, and be able to kind of leap between the two and explain each side to the other while enabling the ad sales and other revenue levers to meet their goals and keep the customer, the audience happy. That's where you live. But ultimately, every day you're translating between all these players. Yes.
You've got to do those translations. And it's not just only media, right? Because again, my word is industry agnostic. And I've come from have an interesting background. But for me, again, like if you focus on the people and make those connections, right, then technology that allows you to be able to deliver against that, or the business that you're supporting becomes secondary to that, right? If you keep your focus on that. But that's how it allows me to be able to do that. But nonetheless, it's still a challenging position.
Well, and I think that your ability to be able to leap from one mindset to another really does stem from your background, as you just hinted at. So, like, okay, we now understand basically what the fuck you do. How the fuck did you get here? Like, where did you come from? And you don't have to go all the way back unless you'd like. But I think you're right. I think the way you got to where you are explains your ability to leap from one context to another pretty seamlessly.
Well, my background, let's traditional, non-traditional. Traditional, I did computer science and business and what have you. It's just the technical pieces. But my journey here is a testament to the dynamic tapestry of people, passion, products, then woven in with media, data, and technology, right? So, like everybody else, I started as a ferocious consumer content, just like many of you who are probably on this call now. Like we all grew up hooked up to our screens, our radio, and then our personal music players growing up, right? So whether it's you come from the era of Sony Music, PlayStation, Walkman, or Walkman, you're coming from Walkman, yeah, right? There's still folks who came from that.
I had a Walkman, then a Discman.
There you go. Tapes whereby you have to join it together, and then the world of iPods and what have you, right? So my path to this chair is a collage of those experiences across industries and a passion for, again, people and creating connections, right? And serving them through the products that we create. Look, and as I got deeper into technology, design, all that whole world, I realized the potential of data to shape narratives. Like back in the day when you were DBA, understanding how data relationship management, like all those world. I've always understood that, like I really understanding that world. You can use it to create personal experiences, right? In a world that's now increasingly becoming more connected as we are now today. So when I look at that, even though I say I'm industry agnostic, right? When you look at the media industry, for me at least, it's not just about producing the content that we produce today, whether your music, whether it's your video. It's about understanding those human stories and making those connections. So after a blend of those gigs, product gigs, design, programming, and even some entrepreneurial adventures that I've had, having my own consultancy and agency and whatever have you. I found myself, being drawn back kind of full circle to this intersection of the product, the data, and then the storytelling piece. So this is how I'm led to this position, and here I am.
And so you sit inside a product that is telling some of the biggest stories on the planet Earth, right? So next year, Peacock is going to have a playoff game exclusively. It's going to have the Paris Olympics, which are going to be just, I think, given the trajectory of live events in streaming, going to be probably, I would imagine, one of the largest streamed things on the planet, maybe second to FIFA or the Super Bowl. But what does that moment in time say to you? Like, first of all, what does the mind go through in a preparation for streaming that large a live event? The television part of it is important, but you work in product and in streaming, and it's going to be massive. I look at Geo doing 30 million people a week sometimes when cricket is streaming there. What does that do to the infrastructure of an organization? So you're prepared, whatever you've prepared for previously, this is going to be probably 2x that, right? And so what happens internally there? What's the chaos, the kind of chaos, or how do you manage that chaos? And then secondarily, given where you sit between data and product, what do you think it says about where all streaming is headed? As Thursday Night Football is now on Amazon, and Sunday NFL Ticket is coming to YouTube, and Indian Premier League is on Geo, and the Paris Olympics are coming to Peacock. So those two things, like, how do you prepare for something like that as an organization? And then secondarily, where do you think that leads us as a streaming ecosystem?
Yeah. So I mean, look, right, you rightfully said, I sit in within the company in a place where I've never, and I got to take my hats off, like a lot of people will, of course, where you work, you want to big it up and whatever have you, but I've never seen any company do what NBCUniversal does when it comes to single live events or live events. Like, they just know how to put the show on. It's just, so we come in as Peacock, right? It makes our life a lot easier from that perspective. But in terms of preparing for that, like, it's really just understanding, how you're going to deliver this. Like, all of our content, right? You can have the best content in the world if you don't have a stack to deliver that. Like, you just won't go anywhere. Not just only for the Olympics, right? That we also have a deal with multi-choice with Africa and what have you. One of the biggest things that we have is that we've got a really great stack in terms of technology stack. And that's
explain that partnership real quick, if you can.
So, well, we have a partnership with MultiChoice, like expanding into Africa, so again, and that's one of the ways in the new world whereby you can't all go it alone, right? We've got this a global expansion that we announced a while back with MultiChoice, who are a big streaming service in Africa, right? It gives us a great growth potential and opportunity in Africa, right? So we're going to build a MultiChoice footprint across 15 markets. And they've got a great, excellent track there, and we're just coming in to help supercharge what they do, right? And one of the major thing here is that our stack is going to be Peacock stack is going to be powering it, so it's a globally skilled technology stack, right? So we are coming in to help them, power that across those 50 African nations,
Well, and
right?
I think that, so that speaks to, again, your perspective on the world. I think a lot of people focus on what is a very mature, very cluttered market, which is North America, right? And
Yep.
obviously, this is where 40% of the world's television revenues are going to come from. However, 60% of the world's revenues come from the rest of the world, and that's growing. That pie is beginning to grow, especially with APAC and Africa,
Yep.
where most of the population is under 20,
Yes.
and 1/3 of the fastest growing economies on the planet are in Africa. So there's
Yep.
newfound expendable income coming to a very young market who wants to stream content, but you can't stream in Africa the same way you stream in North America or in Europe, right?
No, that is very much true, right? Because there's the many different things that still comes to play. While Africa is great in terms of it's a younger market and it's a market that's growing up with this technology of streaming, right? The behaviors are changing, and there's no other continent in the world that has that type of demographics, right? And when you look at where the world is going and the way people are streaming, you can only see that there's only huge growth there. But there are also challenges, right? Like not just only for our industry, but Africa has challenges, and the more that technology advancement happens, it was the same thing with the West. Remember the on-prem days versus cloud, right? I can remember 7 years ago consulting with companies that were like, "There's no way I'm putting my stuff in the cloud." And now, if you don't have stuff in the cloud, they're looking at you like you've got two heads or three heads, right? So it's all about technology advancement, right? That helps us push forward, but you can't just wait until that happens. Right, you've got to be in the play. You've got to be part of the community, right? You've got to invest in the local market. You have to invest in local content, not just bringing content from the West and just thinking everybody is going to adapt to that. They're changing. The way they think is changing. And I'll get to part of technology in a minute, but I recall 2 weeks ago, I think I was watching a show that were interviewing a Trevor Noah, who I hope everybody knows, ex-Daily Show host,
Yeah.
South African.
Yeah.
Export, great comedian. And he was just talking about when he was back in South Africa in the Highlands, and he was hanging out with his Nigerian friends. And Nollywood is another whole thing we could talk about. But like he was hanging out with his Nigerian friends,
Obviously.
and they were watching, Nigerian movies and stuff. And he was looking at things with the Western eye, like we grew up, watching the Gene Kellys of the world. We watching, what's that gentleman's name? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Jack Nicholson.
Nicholson, right? And that's the barrier, that's the height, right? And the production value, all of that stuff. And he's looking at it like, this is funny, it's fun to watch Nollywood, but like
it does not have the same kind of
production
values that here in the West. And that's the thing. So you mentioned Nollywood, which I believe is either first or second in total number of hours of film produced on the planet Earth now. I think it's Nollywood and Bollywood in first and second place, and then Hollywood in third place.
I think it's about 2,500 a year, like content. We're not talking about revenue, right? But the revenue,
right? No, it's just pure volume of films.
Pure volume of films that they pump out, right? And while it may not be actually the quality from 12 years ago, totally different, but the mistake that we make sometimes in this content consumption world of like the high level of quality that we're so used to is thinking that everybody's on that same level, or everybody.
Well, so let me give you another example that isn't your company, which is cricket. And it's the second time I'll mention it in this conversation, but cricket in India, or India itself, where Disney went in, frankly, like the White Knight, and said, we know how to figure out India, and we're going to take Indian Premier League cricket, and we're going to charge a pretty high price for it. Netflix went in at an even higher price because they understood the market and understood how to monetize it. So Netflix didn't work. Then Disney didn't work with Hotstar. They let the streaming rights go to Geo. They're now shedding subscribers in India because they lost the streaming rights to IPL. And now Geo is turning it into this mass product, 30 million, 35 million concurrent streams, most of it on mobile, not on connected television sets. So it's a whole other use case. And so not understanding, so there's understanding the tech, there's understanding the market, and then there's understanding what the data tells you, which is Asia, unlike a lot of the rest of the earth, is very, very heavily mobile. Africa probably in certain regions will do that as well. But you have to understand, you have to be able to context switch. You have to be able to go from data to tech to content to market to demographic, all kind of across the whole thing, and model across that in order to make these things successful.
I think one of the things, no, yes, and right. That's the
Yes,
first
there
thing.
you go.
What first thing they teach you in acting school? Yes, and one of the things that I think that a lot of companies from the West miss is there are certain cultural differences and idiosyncrasies that you don't take into account, right? When you're working with all these type of like areas, and one of the things that they miss is that going in there with curiosity, right? When you approach these guys with curiosity, they will lean in and partner with you. But if you go in as like, I know best, again, I don't know anything that, you know, Disney or whoever Netflix did before. You're probably more versed in that world than I am. But one thing that I know as a kid that's from there, so my family's from there, being curious and coming in with that openness, right? That's a cultural difference that they have. That great, we want to make money and revenue, but respect and understanding is just as important for us. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, so that's why when you go in there in terms of, we know how to do this stuff. Yeah, technically you may know how to run it, but there are limitations as well that exist in that world. And even in Africa, when you look at it, the proliferation of smartphone is still less than feature phone. And a lot of people don't know the distinction between feature phone and smartphone, right?
So a decent amount of viewing is still on feature, you can still watch on feature phone, yes?
You can watch on some feature phone, but most feature phone, you're not there, right? You watch a smartphone, but then the different levels of smartphone. So that's why you have like Huey, or how, I don't even know how to pronounce it, is big in Africa. UI, big in Africa as well.
But who is that? And that's the thing, is like, when you want to know where the opportunity on the planet Earth is, look where the Chinese government invests their resources, and they're plowing money into the African continent, making deals with local partners the way that you should, to provide resources to build out certain areas of that continent. There's a good lesson there. One, there's that continent is going to explode as a revenue generator, and a lot of the countries that we're now addicted to as revenue generators, like North America and a lot of Europe, they're going to mature and flatten because of just population. So everything you just said about geography, you have to go in with curiosity, right? You have to go in with an open mind. You have to go in asking questions, and they will teach you. One could also say, and especially when you talk about Africa, because 50% of the population in Africa is under the age of 20.
And it's getting younger.
Right. So that's also true, though, for generations. So wherever you are in the world, as long as you go in with an open mind and you ask questions and you don't think that you know everything, and you're ready to understand how they're using media and decisions they may make, there's a lot to be learned from, Generation Y, millennials, which would you count yourself as a millennial, or are you Gen X? I'm asking an indelicate question. I apologize. But you manage a lot of millennials, and you kind of, again, you're sitting in between. You have to context switch between boomers and Gen Xers and millennials and Gen Z, who I imagine you have pretty,
and Gen AAs. Because I've got 6 and 7s who now,
working for you. You have 6 and 7-year-olds working for you. That seems. Are you Sarah Huckabee?
Listen, I don't know anything about that.
That's a deep cut. That's a deep cut.
Well, hey, I'm paying rent. They live in my house. I pay the school fees. So
they're working for you.
So whatever it is they're consuming, I'm paying attention to it and how they're consuming and what's important for them. So
they are driving. Yes, they are driving. You are correct. We are at an inflection point right now where, and we hit upon 2 of them. One, North America is no longer going to be a lot of the growth engine for a lot of the media ecosystem. I think that's a surprising fact for a lot of folks. There's growth here, but it's not good for multinational companies. It's likely to come from other territories. Secondarily, we are in a world where millennials, Gen Zs, and Gen As now basically control the financial underpinning. I don't think that a lot of people in your generation, my generation, and older than us understand just how significantly that shift has happened in the last 36 months, as 50% of the workforce is now Gen Y or Gen Z. and TikTok is now ruling the world, and Roblox is now ruling the world. And so how do you think about those cross-pollination through generational eyes? You talked about it kind of globally. What do you think, as somebody who manages a lot of people in your life from different generations, how do you see that?
Well, one of the things that I think, again, consumption has changed. What's important to them has changed, right? And when we think about, I think about it from the perspective in terms of where are we going? Where's the future, right? And what's important for them is inclusivity, right? What's important to them is the consciousness of the companies they deal with, right? What they put their money behind, what they buy into. And we have to understand that. And I think one of the
These are the people who work for you and the consumers, you're saying.
No, I'm talking about the younger, the Gen AAs, the ones that are Gen Xers,
Got it.
right?
Got it.
You know, we've got to understand them for us to be able to posture to build a relationship with them. Right. Again, like when I talk about things, I look at it from the perspective of how can I build a relationship with this person that's creating fandoms out of them, right? How can I, and you can only do that from understanding them.
And does your data, do you have, does the data you see, generally speaking, paint a picture of how publishers like, you know, NBCUniversal or others can create ongoing relationships, fandoms, for generations who fandom around, you know, things like Marshmallow on Fortnite or on Mr. Beast on YouTube? How do publishers, other publishers, kind of cut across generational boundaries and create fandoms from these new users? Or are we going to lose them to these social media platforms and gaming platforms?
Well, yeah. So as a media, we're not just competing with ourselves, right? So what you're competing with is really just the time, right?
Right.
You're trying to build, you know, time with myself, whoever it is, right? So and again, this is where I bring it back to the relationship, right? Are you creating content that they care about, right? Not just only content they engage with, and the people in front of the screen, the people, it's just as important be people behind the screens, how diverse that is. What's the story you're telling? How inclusive is it, right? You know, you've seen breakout things like, what was it? Money Heist that came out of Spain, right?
Yeah.
I love that show, right? Again, like when we think about Europe, we don't, Spain, when we think about Europe, it's like US and the UK creates most of the content, right? So there's still opportunities there as well, like what we call, you know, outside of those elements. And what we fail to see is that because of the globalization, right, what the technology has allowed us to be able to do, people are getting exposed, right, to different parts of the world that they've never been in. They're being curious about different parts of the world they've never been in. They're seeing content come out from different parts of the world. It's a creative economy for a reason, right? So, you know, we always think of these big stars. You have to start now thinking about what about those smaller stars? I'm telling you, my son is telling me, oh, do you know this person? I'm like, no. Do you know this person? No. I don't, half of the people he idolizes, I don't know who they are.
How do we incorporate, you know, those types of stars, the Twitchers of the world and the TikTokers of the world? I mean, you see it. Addison Rae is going to star into this major kind of Netflix thing, and the D'Amelios are on Hulu and on Netflix. But you know, is there? It seems like, well, let me step that back. It seems like you're saying to me, at the end of the day, the stories, the narratives, the content does matter most. And I've seen data that actually kind of triple clicks on that, meaning the people between the ages of 17 and 25, 500,000 persons study by GWI. What they said, cost model, business model, was like fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh on the thing. It came after, do they have really cool shit I can watch? That's relevant to, relevancy of the content was number one. Number two was original cool shit I cannot find anywhere else.
Yes.
Number three was the refresh rate of it, like how often, like the Crunchyroll of it. Crunchyroll is this avid fan base. You know, it's not the biggest service in the world, but boy, oh boy, do they have a constant subscriber base with very, you know, not that much churn, and then an even larger free install base who watches it for free because they always have new content direct, you know, fresh new content direct from Japan. And then, you know, then came the size of the library. So that's another thing a Crunchyroll has, that they continue to survive, this niche service, despite all these big tech folks now. And now, granted, they're part of a larger enterprise, but at the same time, at Sony, but at the same time, it demonstrates that content is at the center of it. Then you get whether it has ads or doesn't have ads, and ease of use, kind of all in a tie together. And then lastly comes foreign content. So you have this panoply of impulses or priorities that younger consumers have when they think about a streaming product. Only some of them go around how much I'm paying for it, and most of them tie to the kind of content and the breadth of content I'm bringing to the table. Is that what you see when you look at Peacock and you look at Sky Data and you're looking at all these different regions? It must cut across there as well.
Let's even zoom out of, you know, any specifics of Peacock, Sky Data. Let's even zoom out of that.
Yeah.
One of the things that for me, again, it's my own personal, you know, insights or belief, right? Is all of those things that you mentioned is, do you have a continuous relationship,
right,
with your fans through these content creators, right? And that's one of the missing pieces, right? Like traditionally is like when you look at the big stars, the time you see them is when they're promoting something, right?
Yeah.
Because they have a,
right,
you know,
right. Not every day.
They want to release. It's like, you know, like, again, like, I understand that there's this exclusivity that, oh, when we finally see them, it's great and whatever have you. The way that the young folks think is totally different. They want to be connected. They want to be consistent.
Well, it's community.
Yeah, it's a community, right? So, and then as part of that community, they're willing to pay premium for it. Right?
Right.
It doesn't have to be volume, but if you have consistency and you're part of the community, you don't wait until when you have a big show to produce that people hear that.
Always
right?
paying for it.
You're always in that world. Like another maybe you might not know this, like these two guys, EYL, Earn Your Leisure. I'm not pushing them or anything, but these guys who during the pandemic they came up with this podcast where they're like doing financial literacy, right, for the underrepresented community, right? A lot of African-American communities and whatever. They've got so big, and now they have edutainment. They've taken it on the road. They have this big events that they do in Atlanta. They've taken it international. They have a big event in the UK. They expand into Africa. They're working with the likes of Steve Harvey.
Do they call themselves Earn Your Leisure University?
Yeah, EYL.
Earn Your Leisure. Yeah.
And we'll have EYL University, and these other I don't know them personally, right? But you just look at that, like that community they created, and the consistency, right? And the content that.
But do you think? Okay, so this is and this is so that's very much most people call it creator economy. I call it community economy for all the reasons we just talked about. Sometimes it's creator led, but sometimes it's going to be brand led. You know, if you watch you watch the Washington Post TikTok channel, to me that's one of the great pieces of content out there, and it's a community. The people love this guy; they've turned him into a star. And there's Duolingo has a really avid fan base for their content, which is also kind of advertainment. But do you think that, I mean, there's two examples of big companies doing it, but do you think the massive, big old media companies understand how to wend some of that fandom-based community content into their DNA? I mean, I've seen it happen here and there, but oftentimes it kind of like peters out. Like, you know, you've seen YouTubers get shows and then it just doesn't really work, or, you know, you do see channels making investments in, but I wonder if the kind of boomer led, Gen X led, big media understands how to get into the community economy, and what you think about that.
I think the way you do it is, okay, brands have people in it, right? And we love the brands we work with. Like, there's a reason why we're there, right? I think part of it has to be, you have to be curious, and you have to think like, you know, almost like an R&D department, that has a pulse on the trend, has a pulse on what's going on in the market, right? And I know we have big thinking, but you also have to have thinking, this not smaller thinking, but like an innovative thinking, right? In terms of you get into the market, you fund it properly. It's not just, you don't think about it just like a cost center, but a revenue potential, right? And I don't see that many companies, doing that, right? I won't tell you if we're doing it or not. But
Well, why
like,
do you think that is? I mean, why do
well,
you think, zoom out of your chair at NBC Universal, high in 30 Rock and your fancy title, and think about the industry writ large for a second and why everybody seems to be in such a shitstorm? Like, why,
well,
how did we all wind up in the same place? I mean, if you feel comfortable talking about it, if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, I'll do 10 minutes. No, I'm kidding.
I
But
don't.
yeah, I mean, why? I mean, let's, you know what? Let me drill down. Why do you think we keep not embracing new thinking? Is it because we don't have new points of view in the room? I talked about generationally speaking. You talked about kind of regionally speaking, not necessarily always inviting the new ideas or the new points of view into the room as you invade a new market or you try to manage a new generation or entice new viewers from a new users from a new generation. It does seem that a lot of decisions are made in very high floors in very tall buildings without the younger generations in the room, without people from these regions in the room, and specifically kind of writ large, without a span of experience from anything other than Ivy League economic class structure. So I think that's a big part of why we wind up in these cul-de-sacs sometimes is we're talking inside bubbles. And I wonder, in the context of context switching, how you feel about that.
Well, no, I would say I think there's partly that, right? I think there's partly that. And there is not, look, there is a place for that. There is a place for that. Like, folks have experiences for a reason. They know the industry, they have the relationships, all of that. What I'm saying is that I think the way I look at it is how can we expand that table, right? So it's not just that, but it's inclusive, it's plus. How can we look into that plus world, right? And not think of things of, well, they're not generating those dollars now. You have to be thinking 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line, because you don't want to be, what's that great hockey player that talks about not like skating to
Where
the
the
puck
puck is going. Is that Bobby Orr? I'm going to guess
yeah,
because the only hockey player I know.
Gretzky or something, Wayne Gretzky or whoever that
Wayne
was.
Gretzky. Yeah, there you go.
I'll tell you, I know something about hockey. Like
I
really.
would hope you guys stream a lot of hockey.
So it's like, skating to where it is, right? But then again, I think also is part of the greater economy whereby, we've got, you've got the larger ecosystem that, yes, we want to see this. And but are we willing to, how much are we willing to pay for it, right now versus then? So it's like a balancing act. I don't envy anybody who has to do that, but for me, when I bring it back to it, it's like, how do you expand that table so that you can have those people equally have a voice and not think of them as like, oh, okay, you're just so nice to have that we need to have at the table to just show
Right,
face.
exactly.
Have
As
to be,
opposed to actually listening,
yes, you
to
have to be inclusive, right? I've heard of, I won't talk about who they are, but like I've heard
diversity
of
and inclusion are two different things. And I think
diversity.
that,
Yeah, they're two different things. But I've also heard of like some of my, people that I know who are good influencers, brands reaching out to them and try to dictate how they do the creatives or what creative they
right.
should do. Like, there's a reason why I have the following for the following I have and the community that I have, right? So I want to understand what your goals are and let me do what I do best. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think I kind of liken it to what was it? Steve Jobs, when he said, we don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people to tell us what to do. And I think the more we do that, and the more we again open that aperture up, the better we become for it as an industry and as a union. Just not just media, it's just general, right? Again, like I study, I'm an avid studier, and I study industries and I study companies, I study things that are happening across, and I see it's a trend. So it's not just only media. So I want to make sure that we do good stuff too. But how can we just get better is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of getting better and looking towards the future, I mean, when you look out across the ecosystem now, sitting from that kind of crossroads of product and data, but also crossroads of product, data, content, business models, you know, kind of global look at where this is all headed. What excites you most? What is the thing? What are the things, or what are the landmark achievements that you expect to come out in the next couple of years, or the new products that you think are going to launch, or new content that you think is going to light the world on fire, that really get you? I mean, because you don't, this is not just a job for you. This is something, as I think this conversation demonstrates, this is a passion for you. So what is the thing that you find that kind of is really lighting a fire in you right now about our ecosystem?
I'm excited about localization, right? Localization, not just only, oh, we're bringing content just from the local or whatever, but like the education that brings along with it, you know, like really opening up the world. And the more you understand about communities, about cultures and groups, the more tolerant you become, right?
Hmm.
The more tolerant we become, the better our laws are,
Hmm.
right? To be more inclusive, right? And that's one of the things that I love about my media. Like, people might say, okay, media, or whatever have you, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like an accelerator of what's to come in terms of the kind of content we put in front of people, the kind of communication, the type of learning, the type of education. There's a reason why, you know, during the pandemic, the kind of content we were consuming were education content, right? They were consuming mindfulness content, with my mind consciousness content. It jumped, right? You've got master classes that are happening that's teaching people about different cultures, how filmmaking is happening with different cultures, how different idiosyncrasies affect different things. Like, again, like, that is what I'm excited about. The opportunity. I'm a third culture kid, right? So growing up in different countries and stuff. So that is a passion for me. I want to see
I love
more.
that. Third culture kid. We've talked about this before,
Yeah.
but like, explain that really quickly.
A third culture kid is are kids who you know, grew up or partly grew up in diverse cultures in different countries that is not just their let's say ancestral culture. Like, I'm Yoruba, right? So I was partly Nigeria and also England, you know, schooled in the States. Like, you have other people in Europe who do the same thing. Like, there's a lot of people in Europe, who grew up in Europe, who have that, like, schooled in Belgium.
And that culture collision is going to wind up being an important part of the conversation on a moving forward basis as well.
Correct, right? So it's like where the world is going. It seemed like my parents are kind of like forecasters of the world, because they're like, the world is going to get smaller. I want you to be in a position, or my brothers too, like, be in a position to be able to navigate that and have more tolerance with different cultures, with different people as you navigate through the world. And that's where we are. That's where we're going, you know. So like, technology is advancing and helping us advance with lightning speed and do it cheaper. Right, I had to do it by traveling and jumping on planes, Lufthansa and Pan Am or whatever. I'm not even going to get into all those stuff. But
Pan
yeah,
Am,
so
remember Pan Am? Everybody should drop their questions in the Q&A if you want to ask questions, because we're going to open it up in a matter of seconds. But what are you watching right now? Like, what's the thing that what is you love content? You mentioned Money Heist. The thing for me that kind of like solidified the internationalism of content right now was Lupin was one.
oh, Lupin, yeah, Lupin.
Yeah. And mostly because it created such a stir with very few episodes. But Squid Game's another good example of that. I mean, we are making a smaller world through these platforms to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So what are you watching now that's really
I am watching what's that one with Anthony Mackie on Peacock?
Oh, I'm
Uh
not watching it.
oh my gosh, it's one of the, again, when we start to talk about um IPs being leveraged and what have you. Mario on Peacock as well. Mario was huge for
Yeah,
us.
yeah. That must have changed a lot of things over there.
Beautiful. I am watching uh Oh my goodness. Now, see, you put me on the spot and all of a
I'm
sudden,
sorry. Well, I'm looking in the chat as opposed to the
uh,
Q&A
uh,
because no one's posting in the Q&A. They're
you know,
posting
that's
in
the
the
thing.
chat.
The latest
But
one with
we,
Anthony Mackie, Full Metal, not Full Metal Jacket.
I'm gonna let you off the hook. We
Something
got
metal.
a
I'll
shout
remember.
out
I'll remember in a minute.
we got a shout out from David Elabute about Yorubas. And he loves
Oh,
Yoruba.
yeah, stand up.
We did get a great question from Katie Aarons about what's the future of the business model in streaming, and then there was another comment, from Jody talking about letting people kind of all tap into the global content pie that is available out there. And then there was another content comment from basically how do you manage subscriptions. So there is this kind of major debate going around the model. How do you, again, forgetting for a second what NBC has done specifically around Peacock and it's free versus paid, and there's different models in different territories as well. Do you see one of my theses is, yeah, it's great that you have paid with no ads and free with all ads, but the consumer really wants an elegant way to traverse that entire spectrum without having to jump through so many wall garden hoops. Is that your point of view?
Well, yeah, the consumer would like that, right? So, but again, I think for us to get to that point, um, some of the current industry models, again, like competition is always healthy, right? There's no doubt about that. But I think we get to the point where, having partnership or collaboration is going to start to matter more, right? And I think, if we listen to our consumers, because I've heard that before many, many times over, that collaboration is gonna be more critical, right? It's gonna be more important. Creating an ecosystem, not just only media to media, right? And we're talking about even non-media collaboration, right? Whether you're working with a telecom or you're doing like loyalty programs here and there, or we've got a deal that we do with American Express, right? Where you can get Peacock and the subscription is covered by American Express or whatever have you. So there's going to be a lot of that that's happening, right? Merchandising and licensing. Okay, we're going to be a lot of that that's happening in terms of how we build revenue and stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about how can we collaborate and how can we partner better, but still be competitive in a healthy way, so we can give our consumers, a more a better experience, right, across our properties and across our what's what I'm looking for, intellectual property, right? I don't know how we're going to do it, but if that opportunity becomes available, I think that'll be a way to go.
You mentioned different new opportunities for advertising, and I think so a blend of revenues is really going to be the model here. If you're stuck in one specific revenue model, chances are you can wind up down a blind spot like Netflix did, or wind up down a different blind spot like BuzzFeed is finding itself. One is too much advertising, the other is too much subscription. Somewhere between the two is just right. But you guys are working on an interesting collaboration with a company called, is it Curve? On shoppable content with new ad products that kind of complement that. Can you talk about that for a second?
Well, I'm not the expert on it, right? But there are more offerings from an ad product perspective. So it's not just only that. So you got the must shop TV, that allows viewers to buy products, right, that appear in all the Peacock content. So imagine that traditionally you've got your advertising product on linear TV or whatever have you, and you see the product and you want to get it. You've got 2 or 3 steps hop to try to go look for where that product is and whatever have you. But imagine that you can click a QR code and you go directly to your shoppable sites, right? Again, Top Chef, knives, things of that nature. Like it just helps you bridge that gap a lot better. That's shoppable TV. And it's kind of like there was something we introduced when we did the Love Island, right? Where you can like you can buy Love Island merchandise off of that when you just do QR code. So it's an extension of that.
Well, like, and younger consumers, I saw a piece of research from Magnite a couple of weeks ago that said that a third of all consumers are shopping on their phones
Oh yes. Oh yes.
while they're
It's
watching something like a Love Island or
yeah.
a Top Chef. And specifically, often they're like, oh, I could use a new knife, and they go into it. So
Yep.
why
Yep.
not
And you,
create
yeah.
that distance? Yeah, between the two.
Yeah. So bridge the gap between that distance. Like again, you want to collapse the gap as much as possible. Again, goes back to the relationship that you want to have with your fan base, right? I'm a huge Top Chef fan, right? It's a Bravo. Little plug there. It's a Bravo show, but I'm huge in that, like Bravo Con, all that whole stuff. Like so, why not bridge that gap with the consumers, right? So that's created a better relationship because I'm the chef in my house. I cook, so I like good. No, honestly, I'm not
That's
joking.
great.
So I like good knives, right? So yeah, that's one area. You also have like Spotlight, Spotlight Plus, right? It's another ad solution that give brands, first impression across Peacock, Fandango, NBCU partners. Then you have things like we still have it, what you call pause ads, right? But now you have this new
Right. You were the first to do that. Yeah.
yeah, Power Break. It's more data informed pause ads, right? That can be personalized to fit a brand's message.
Well,
So
I think from a revenue standpoint, it used to be like always be closing, ABC, the famous line by Alec Baldwin in Glengarry Glen Ross. But now it's like always be innovating, ABI, which sounds like
you have to be. You have to
an
be. But
intestinal disease, but it does feel like we need to be always be out there innovating. The consumer is always expecting new products, and we haven't yet perfected the model, so we have to keep thinking about where we're headed, where the puck is going.
We have to keep innovating, but we have to make sure at the bottom at the base of that is, are we cannibalizing the relationship, or are we advancing, and are we supporting the relationship? And I think that is the key for me. If
Got it.
again, bridging that gap is a great way that we're bridging.
What does your user want? Yes.
Exactly, right. So we're bridging the gap.
Speaking of, oh, go ahead.
No, that was
So
it.
I'm going to move on to Beth's question. I don't know that you have a question for this. Are you doing any, is NBC Universal Peacock doing any influencer based shows? Is that something you know about or can talk about?
I do not know.
Okay.
That
I
do
will
not.
answer that for myself.
That's a good look that one can.
I will answer that myself to put in a really good plug. So yes, I am producing a TikTok only podcast. It's a talkcast. It's called
Okay.
Quickies. You can look for it right now. Joe Smith from Detroit is at Motor City is asking, I'm starting a brand new AVOD platform, so ad supported, out of Detroit. TV, film, podcast, and music. Any advice? I will start by saying I think I love the fact that it's across these different disciplines: music, podcast, film, TV, because I think that's increasingly what the consumer wants is a Maslow's hierarchy of feeds in one place. But what do you think about Joe's idea to start an AVOD platform out of Detroit? I don't think it has to do. I don't think it's all Detroit content to be specific, but it is film, podcast, and music.
Yeah, the only challenge is you being too split out the gate, right? In terms of
too many different things.
Too many different things, confusing your audience, right? Building the first thing I would think about is think through where your main audience is, right? What they care about the most. Then you can bring on the other services ancillary, right? And then later on combine them and bundle them together. But you have got to really pick a lane and pick a position, and then start from that. And I don't think you have bottomless pit of financial backend. Everybody can need more money and can use more money. So it's like just making sure that whatever it is that you have, you focus it on where the best opportunity is, build that first, and then start to test those other ancillaries and see how people react to it. You may find out that nobody really cares for it, or care for one versus the other. And then that way you've not gone out and like spent so much money on like building this platform that stands this product up that you can't really move forward with.
Yeah. And then, to kind of tie to like, can a model stand up over time? Bob Baskerville great name, asked, we're seeing subscription rates. I believe he means the cost of subscribing to these different platforms creep up across the board. So everybody's raising their prices. First Netflix did it, then Disney just did it again. Do you see this as a temporary, and I think he's putting this to both of us, but a temporary course correction, or is this the new normal for consumers? Do you want to take that first? I'm happy to take it first if you want to think
You
for a
go
sec.
first.
So I think what you're going to see people focus on is ARPU. So the average revenue per user, regardless of where it comes from. So I think in one point, Disney is raising prices because I think they can. Hotstar is a really the subscribers are losing from Hotstar is a good example. They're shedding them because they're very low ARPU subscribers, and they're trying to focus on subscribers in the US, both with ads and without ads across all their platforms. So it's about increasing the average revenue per user every single month, and increasing the number of users with high revenues per user. Low revenues per user are fine, but they are ultimately can wind up being expensive. And I think that's what the ecosystem is finding out. Now your turn. Or you can pass.
Can I pass on this one?
Yeah, you could take the fifth. That's no problem. Anonymous attendee. I don't know if I like anonymous questions. How are you faring with the union strikes? Is it affecting your bottom line? Again, I don't think this is necessarily your area.
No, not my area. But you know, like anything that that is media will affect us, right? Yes, it's affecting, it's gonna affect because of course the content and the talent or whatever have you cannot be there to promote stuff and what have you. But you know, we're supporting, you know, our company, and we're supporting, you know, the whatever you call the talent, right? And I'm sure they'll all come to do the right thing and get to a decision that should work for all, right? But yes, it's going to affect us. Maybe we're going to be feeling it now, but it's something we're watching.
Well, it does. I mean, I would say I'll just weigh in on it. Does seem like they're at least talking to one another as opposed to past one another. We'll see where that ends. I do think it's probably Thanksgiving before this thing gets totally settled, and I think you're going to see sports things like, Sunday Night Football and Thursday Night Football and NFL Sunday Ticket becoming really important this fall from a audience standpoint. Jody Weaver actually mentioned brought up something that I think is a really big compliment to NBC, especially in the sports arena. You guys seem to use the influencer world really, really, really well. So, you know, going back to Leslie from SNL becoming, you know, off of Twitter, taking her and making her your official commentator. And then you have Kevin Hart and Snoop Dogg doing Olympic coverage. Even Johnny Weir, who was like, you know, he was huge on social media, which is why you guys hired him to cover the skating coverage. So like, I do feel like the sports department of all things seems to really lean into the creator economy in a pretty interesting way.
Like I said, they know how to put on a show like I've never seen.
Right. It is a best in class. And I do think, you know, while I will opine about your company here, besides the fact that you have a massive infrastructure, or, you know, with Comcast and all of their products and the emergence of Zumo, but NBCUniversal, particularly with its penchant for live sports, which was something that was born under the Steve Burke era, you know, really takes it to the next level that I think gives a competitive advantage, you know, out there in the marketplace against someone like a Netflix, who has zero live sports, or someone like a Warner Brothers Discovery, who is, you know, contemplating whether or not to rebid for basketball or not. You know, yeah. And it seems like it's one of those major drumbeats of your operation on a regular basis. It produces massive audiences and big fandom, like you said.
Those guys, like I said, those guys, when I mean, I'm in rooms with them and I'm in awe of what they do, right? Like I didn't come from that, and they just know how to put it together. And so if they tell me jump, I go how high. Like they're just phenomenal at it. Like, honestly, like they're just good. Period.
Well, so this has been a great conversation. With the 60 seconds we have left, anything you want to leave us with as a kind of parting thought from Rome on vacation? I want to thank you for your time. You've been, as promised, at least for me anyway, infinitely entertaining and enlightening. But anything you want to leave us with before you jet off to the Italian countryside?
Oh, well, think global, but act local.
There you go. I love it. Thank you very much. I want to again thank our hosts here at Streaming Media Connect. I want to thank Quincy Olatunde for giving us his time from vacation. I think that's incredibly important. The winning song and the winner of the $50 gift card, the song is Sissy Strut. The band was the Meters. And now I actually have to go to the chat and look at, and the winner was Catherine Kelshaw. I believe she's still here. Catherine, you will reach out from someone at Streaming Media Connect at the end of the conference via email. Again, all of these sessions, if you only came in halfway through or if you missed any of the sessions, all these sessions will be live on the YouTube of Streaming Media I think starting next week. So look that up and look for the link in the chat. Quincy, again, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you, guys.
All right, I will see you. By the way, I now have one last thing. We have another panel in about 30 minutes, and it is the view from the edge, the state of cloud CDN edge integration. So stick around. We will have a great panel on that topic in about 30 minutes, about 1 o'clock. Thanks so much.
Technology. Awesome.